Time now for part two of our Around the CHL segment with Nick Marek, the voice of the Portland Winterhawks, looking at the U.S. division, which also contains the Everett Silvertips, Spokane Chiefs, Tri-City Americans, and Seattle Thunderbirds. Throw some names at you, some guys that are picked in the third round of the NHL draft. You have Gianni Fairbrother, draft pick of Montreal in Everett, Adam Beckman, his draft pick of Minnesota in Spokane. You have the new import goaltender in Spokane, Lukáš Párik, a draft pick of the Los Angeles Kings, and someone you're very familiar with, Johnny Ludvig, draft pick of the Florida Panthers in Portland. A lot of names to throw at you, but tell us what you think about that group.
They're all game changers as well. They all have a different role, and they play that role for their team, and that's why they're so good at what they do. Johnny Ludvig on the Portland side, just a really good shutdown defenseman. He led the entire Western Conference in plus-minus last year, which I know is a very tainted stat, but when you aren't the championship team like a Prince Albert Raiders or coming out of the league when everybody's going to be at plus 60 and looks like just because they're a team, they're going to succeed in that category. Ludvig's a guy who goes up against top lines and shuts them down. This year, already over a point per game, was named captain as a 19-year-old. Of course, would be eligible for juniors next year unless the Florida Panthers want to use him in Springfield or Florida. So that's kind of his role, but now he's taking on that more of that two-way side, and he's actually leading the team in scoring early on this season as we go into October. Adam Beckman came in as a very promised 17-year-old rookie, took the league by storm from a 16-year-old. The scoring touch came really quick for him. He found a niche on the top power play for the Chiefs, and that home kind of stayed for a while. Lukáš Párik, the goaltender there in Spokane, I haven't personally seen him play yet, but it was one of those situations where Spokane had a couple of 20-year-old goaltenders and win-now situation. That's great, but you also have to think about the future a little bit. So they kept one and then brought in Párik in the CHL import draft, and everything I kind of heard, he's kind of all over the place. He's one of your typical European goalies that just has a different emotion on the ice, kind of wears the game well, but I know he's expected to be a key cog for them this year. And to wrap things up, for Fairbrother's side, he kind of came into a defensive system in Everett that's a very trap-heavy team. That's why Dustin Wolf had so much success in his first season as a starter. Of course, Carter Hart came through the systems for 4 years, so the goalie pipeline's been tremendous, but a lot of that is credit to the defense in front for Everett. They're a very frustrating team to play in front of. Gianni Fairbrother kind of comes in. He figures out that system. He's a shutdown kind of role. He moves pucks really well. He's kind of a mix of a two-way player. I think this year in his second year going into the Western Hockey League, now that he's been returned officially to his junior club, he's probably going to explode as well, and you're going to see him with some pretty good uptick of numbers. Maybe you can almost look back at a Ty Smith from year 1 to year 2. Of course, it's not going to be in the 70-point range, but if you're going to jump from 20 to 40, 45, that's a considerable jump for a D-man. I really like him on his skates as well. I think he's a good skater, and there's those middle-aged prospects that teams got to use down the road in the NHL to fill out their roster, whether it's at the National Hockey League or in the American Hockey League, and they're kind of a role that they're working with those players on. So just if you aren't a first or second round pick, everyone kind of thinks they aren't going to be that great. I get it. They won't be the next Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews, but they're going to play a key role in the team that could end up popping 40, 50 goals in a season. Just look at your Leon Draisaitl in Edmonton a year ago. Braden Point, he was a third, fourth, or fifth round pick, something like that, out of Moose Jaw in the Western Hockey League, and now he's a star over in Tampa. Everybody kind of has a different path. It's really exciting to see what these guys are going to do in their 18-year-old, 19-year-old seasons.
Earlier, you talked about players being ranked for the NHL draft. You could touch on the group, but really interested in Seth Jarvis because I think some mocks have him sneaking into the first round. Obviously, you'd be familiar with him in Portland. Tell us about his game.
Jarvis is a super gritty player. He's really hard in the forecheck. A little bit of an undersized, I guess you could say, for an NHL standard. Myself, I don't really mind if you're 5'11", 5'10", as long as you're effective. And that's exactly what Jarvis is. He could play the power play on the half wall. He could play a bumper position. He could run the point. So he's kind of a hybrid from there. He's a center or a wing combo. The coaches tend to favor him on the wing because I think they think that's where he's going to develop maybe the best. But he's just such a scrappy forward, gets to the net, has a nice nose to get there, can create plays on his own, very gifted hands. His skating's improved over the summer. So he's just that all-around really good player. There's maybe not one aspect where he's dynamite, which is probably why he's not projected to go in like the top 15 as of right now. But he has all the tools that if he could really polish one or two of them to become an A kind of tool, Seth Jarvis is going to have a humongous ceiling moving on to the next level. Portland fans already love him in terms of his rookie scoring from a season ago. The stat that I like to pull out is the Winterhawks have had Cody Glass, Nick Patan, Sven Baertschi come through as 16-year-olds, and Seth Jarvis, under Mike Johnston, the head coach, had the most points of all of that crop of 16-year-olds, including Cody Glass. That's kind of just shows you as rookie coming in, he lived up to the hype a little bit. Going into the second season when he's only 17 years old and he's playing a top line minutes, so it's tough because you're going to be matched up against 20-year-olds on the other side often. But it's something that's going to be a little bit of a learning curve early on.
One team we haven't touched on is the Tri-City Americans. No drafted players there, but a very famous name behind the bench in Kelly Buchberger. Tell us a little bit about his coaching style based on what you've seen.
Tri-City's a team that came in and they made some noise last year. Portland Winterhawks fans saw it firsthand. I think they only won one of the 8 meetings against Tri-City a season ago. Stu Barnes was on their staff. To go back to our talk with the NHL, he's now a scout for the new NHL expansion team that's coming in. So there's a good connection and healthy relationship there now with Tri-City. But Kelly Buchberger just knows how to build a team. Beck Warm, the goaltender, has been outstanding for them. He's certainly one of their MVPs of the year already. Christoph Rabik came back, as did Kyle Olson from their training camp. So a couple guys that were signed a little bit later. Kyle Olson now with the Buffalo Sabres organization after he was drafted by Anaheim. So he's coming back as a captain. There's certainly some firepower up front. But it was a team that did spend a couple of pieces a few years ago to try to go for the championship here in the Western Hockey League. Didn't pan out. So Kelly Buchberger and his staff are doing a good job of trying to assess what they need and figure out how to kind of set up their roster for the future. And with some of those pieces, you got to be competitive in the U.S. division, but there's some young guys that are certainly coming up. Sasha Mutala, one of them with the Colorado Avalanche, he was a mid-round pick for them as well. They're pretty much right on par with other teams in the division. But Kelly Buchberger certainly knows what he's doing, and the coaching staff throughout the U.S. division is quite impressive.
One of the interesting things about junior hockey, you get to see the stars of the future on the ice, and sometimes you see the stars of the past behind the bench. Well, great insight on everything in the U.S. division, Nick. Best of luck covering the Winterhawks this season.
Hey, thanks, Patrick. Appreciate it.
That's Nick Marek. He is the voice of the Portland Winterhawks in our Around the CHL segment. You're listening to the intermission of Carstar, Cape Breton Eagles Hockey on 1270 CJCB.